Hello, everybody, and welcome to TEDxFrome. My name is Dawn Denton, and this is our Froome for Thought digital program, which is leading up to our in-person event, which we hope to confirm very soon for March 2021. Tonight, we have a fantastic panel lined up. We've got two lovely ladies here who are going to be sharing about igniting your spark to find your creative future and create a creative future for yourself. So you might recognize Nicola Tanner. She's part of our dream team here in Froome. And Nicola has for 20 years been helping people find career solutions. And that's from young people to business owners and corporate CEOs. And she's been a bit of a traveler because it's happened in Singapore, Dubai, and now she's back in the UK. So we're thrilled that you're back in the UK. And I'm even more thrilled that you're in Froome, Nicola. And then joining us from the Isle of Man, we have June Whiteman. And June immigrated from South Africa in 2001 and made the Isle of Man her home. And what sparked June's idea, this idea worth spreading, was that her husband Martin has always said that if you find your passion, you never have to work a day in your life. And as a shoe designer, that's how he felt about his career. He said he never worked. So let's get started. Let's talk about this exciting spark. So when we talk about having a spark that we need to ignite, Nicola, what do you think that spark is?
So I think it can look a lot of different ways. So for some people, it's a passion that starts when they're very young. But for others, it's actually a combination of talents that maybe takes quite some time to emerge. For me, it wasn't until I was in my early 30s that I actually realized what my spark was all about.
And June, what is your spark?
Do you know, Dawn, I think it's slowly becoming evident that it's working with people. And I have this desire to work with younger people and help them identify from an early age what it is that really drives them, so that when they get to the point of leaving school, they know what they want to do. Well, not know what they want to do, but they know which direction they want to go in.
Yeah, and they're excited about that direction as well. I think that's the difference as well. So when we talk about a creative future, what do you mean by a creative future? Because we're not just talking here about the arts, we're talking about being creative in everything. So what does that encompass, Nicola? What do you think?
Well, for me, a big part of it is about entrepreneurial skills or approaches to things. We need to solve a lot of problems, don't we? We've got a pandemic on our hands, but even before that, we have major climate change situation. These are the kinds of situations that we're not going to solve through doing things the way we've always done them. We're going to need a creative approach. So for me, a big part of creativity is about solving problems and coming up with innovative ways of doing things. And yeah, as I say, it's not just a nice to have, it's a real, urgent need.
Yeah, I think it is too. So June, do you feel the same about finding that kind of creativity?
I do, and I think children need to be encouraged to design, to observe, so that they can translate what they see into something evident, whether it be a drawing or a creation of some sort, and to just give them the time to connect with that creative, with their imagination and their intuition. And I think children are very intuitive and they can be very innovative, but they need the space to develop that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I noticed is that we in South Africa only went to school when we were 7. And I know that there are a couple of Scandinavian countries that do the same. But I wondered if maybe starting school so young has an impact on their creativity. What do you think, Nicola?
I think starting school at whatever age, it's really important. It's interesting, both of my older children, now adults, did at least a portion of their schooling in Montessori education. And Montessori is definitely an example. Maria Montessori really had she really wanted to create that space that we were talking about, that space to create and to learn. And so I do think it's not so much when they start school, but what kind of school children start in order to have that, creative play. I absolutely agree with June on that. But the scary part is when, you know, kids are forced too early to, you know, into a sort of rigid system where it's, you know, you've got to fill in a worksheet and you've got to sort of be tested, and none of those things are going to, you know, ignite, you know, creative spirit. So
yeah, and I think one of the things that it's about finding something that makes them excited. And I'm not sure if we have a solution, but what kinds of things do you think make people excited and when they find what they love? And how do we get that out of people, June? Do you have any idea?
I'm not sure that, I think that's really what I would like to work on, is trying to find a way for children to identify, or maybe just to listen, because they probably know better than we do what they want. But the system is so rigid. And if we can just give them the space to experiment and to see life as an adventure, and to just go with whatever is inside them, but also to get them to talk to us and tell us what it is that they really want, or what they perceive that they want, and then we can help channel and lead them in the right direction.
I think career guidance is something that that's come up for me before. Is that the teacher at school who gave me career guidance had taught my mother 30 years before. So she started teaching in 1959 when my mother was in her final year of school. She was still in the school in 1989 when I was getting career guidance from her. And I'm not sure she really knew what was out there, because she'd been in the school system that whole time. So where can people start exploring, Nicola? How do they do this, about not just being in the school system and hoping they're going to get the right kind of direction at school?
I think it's really interesting to hear that, Dawn. And it's a story I've heard so many times from, you know, from people that I've talked to about this, you know, across the world, that, you know, careers guidance really can be very limiting. So that's not the answer, but I think there are a lot of things that schools can do. For me, finding your spark is often going to happen through wide experiences, right? So whether those, and one thing that schools can do is organize some kind of work experience, or, you know, or activity trips, you know, all of those sorts of things where children get to go out of what they do day to day and experience something different. And I think it's that wide experience that's really critical. The worrying thing, I mean, there's a survey that I came across of young people in the UK, which talked about how the vast majority of those young people were focused on just 10 different occupations. That's not going to work. You know, it didn't match up with actually what the projections were in terms of jobs that were going to be available. But more importantly, it didn't encompass any entrepreneurial options at all. So to me, yeah, it's really important that that wide experience, you know, where children get to do try out new things, try out new ideas. As June said, you know, they need to be listened to. They need to have that opportunity to explore and experiment.
Yeah, well, I think the concern really is for a lot of teachers is they don't know what the future jobs are going to be. I mean, I think about 5 years ago, we were preparing the young people for a world that was 5 years ago. And the world changes so quickly that it's now 5 years on, and that preparation is no longer. So how would we make that connection, June, if you're preparing them for that time period?
I think we need to look at the leaders of our industries wherever we live, sort of closer to home, particularly with restrictions in place and people possibly having to stay closer to home in the immediate future. And I think if we can get the business leaders to come in and just talk to children about what it is that their job entails, so that they're actually giving them an insight to what is going to happen when they leave the classroom. I had an interesting discussion with somebody last week. I'm very interested in seeing more women on boards, and possibly looking at a school program, rolling it out on the Isle of Man. And he suggested that if we get to the point where we have a group of school children, that we actually take them into an actual boardroom and let them experience what that would be like. And I thought that was such a good idea, because it makes it more real. You know, I'd like to see that as an idea rolled out at some point.
That's a fantastic idea. Nicola, I remember you were talking about bringing young people to the networking events, the business networking events that you were going to. That's on a similar line, isn't it? To get them to talk to people outside of their own space of what jobs are available.
Yes, and feel confident in connecting with adults, you know, older, you know, it depends on the age of whether we're talking about children or, you know, teenagers, but at any age they can start to experience. The younger that they get into that sort of environment, it becomes less alien, and they will build in confidence. To me, networking is a skill that I learned a lot later on in life than I, you know, it would be, let's put it this way, it would have been helpful to start that a lot younger. I think, you know, there was no age at which it's, you know, it's not a good idea to connect with other people. Absolutely right. And to build confidence, that was one thing. You know, I kind of left school thinking that my academic success was going to be sufficient for me to make it in the world, but no, it's really all about, it's, you know, as they say, it's not about what you know, it's who you know, and who you know comes from, you know, confidently connecting with people. So I think that's so important.
So there's a confidence that you've mentioned there, and June, that's something that I think young people lack in a lot of ways. I mean, I think about growing up and at what you can't really pinpoint the age that you go, well, now I can remember that I became confident then. Going into the big wide world is scary. So preparing them the confidence, how do we help them with that?
I think if we can give them the tools that they're going to need, a little toolbox that they can take with them as they step out into the bigger world. But I also think, going back to what Nicola was saying about the networking, I think if we can teach children how to converse, how to behave in a conversation, I think the ability to listen is so important. And, you know, the minute you engage with somebody and you can hear that they're actually interested in what you want to say, there is that natural flow of, I want to hear more about you. And again, going back to the networking, when I realized that networking wasn't about talking about me, but finding out about the person I was talking to, it just put a whole new slant on it, because I was terrified of networking. Now I see it as an adventure of meeting somebody else and learning about them. But going back to the little toolbox, I think it goes back to leaving school and not knowing anything about tax, how to write a check, how to fill in a form for an electricity account, all of those basic things. And I like to think that that's changed since 1970 something.
There's some confidence. Do you know, it's interesting you say that about, I was very lucky because in some ways that it was just my mother and I. And so whenever she made a financial decision, she always included me. And I think I came out with more of an understanding of how the household happens. Do you know, and I'm not saying, you know, children need to be petrified that we've only got 10 quid in the bank, but it might just be those conversations. I remember her saying to me, I'm going to be changing jobs, which means I'm going to probably have to drive further, but we'll have more money and, you know, that kind of stuff. So I was always aware of those other consequences. And I think maybe including young people into the everyday life to see what adulthood is about, because I think that's the other thing, you know, is preparing them for adulthood as opposed to, you know, all the other things as well. But if they're confident adults, then they might find their spark. Do you have any views on that, Nicola?
Yeah, I really do. I mean, I think it's all about preparing young people to take risks as well, isn't it? Because you know, and to learn from their experiences, but not to be afraid to step out and try, you know, new things. I mean, I think it's Richard Branson who talked about how we should fail quickly, fail often, and not be fearful of failure. I'm still working on that, but I do really hope that the next generation might, you know, sort of, deal with failure differently, see it differently, probably come up with a different word for it altogether.
Yes, I don't like the word failure at all. I hate it.
So what can we use instead then, June?
Got me there. let's just try again. Yeah, and in fact, but then another slant on this is I read a LinkedIn post today about quitting. If things are not working, quit and move on and find something else that is working, because there is no point in staying in something that you really don't like doing. And if there is a message there for young people, please, if you don't like doing it, find something else that you really want to do. And just go and do it. Visualization is so important, isn't it? That if you can just, whatever it is, just visualize where you want to be or who you want to be with and how you want to be living. A lifestyle, I think, is the easiest thing to visualize. And then just let it happen, and it will.
If you created it, then it will happen. If every step that you take in your daily life is one step closer to making that happen, then you can't but get there. You have to get there.
It's so true. It's like having a map when you're planning a journey, isn't it? We all know where we're going on holiday. So why do we just not apply the same principle to where we want to get in life?
And that's interesting you mentioned that, because I think it's about transferable skills as well. And, you know, you were talking about, you know, money and all of that and how to be an adult. But I think if we teach the basics, transferable skills, that whatever the world is like when they finish, because we only have the experience of what our parents did for us, and they only had the experience of what their parents did for them. But if you think about the world when we were 18 and the world for 18-year-olds now, we don't have a connect with that world. There's a lot of things that so it's about the transferable skills, isn't it?
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
So let's talk about the spark. How do you know when you've ignited that spark? How does it feel and how does it manifest itself?
When you wake up in the morning and all you can think about is that thing. And if you happen to be in a job that, or not a job, if you happen to be in a career that does that, then every day is a Friday. You don't even think about, oh, I've got a whole week ahead of me. You just can't wait to get in on a Monday morning. And yeah, I don't know too many people who feel like that about their careers, but yeah, I've been lucky enough to be married to one.
Fantastic. So you've got a spark at home all the time. That keeps your spirits up. That keeps your spirits up. And Nicola, for you, how does that manifest itself, the spark?
So I'm going to try and pronounce an American-Hungarian professor's name, because he studied this in a sense. And his name, I think, is Mihail Csikszentmihalyi. Something like that, anyway. It's a very long name. He looked at something called flow. So if you Google flow, you'd find his name, I think. And flow is an experience. It's what we experience when we are challenged by something and fascinated and interested in it at the same time. So the challenge part is important. If it's something that we find easy, then that's more like a leisure activity. But the flow experience really happens when we're challenged by something new. And to me, that's a big part of spark. It's probably not the only part, but I think it's an important part of it. So for me, when I meet someone who is not happy at work, then that sort of like ignites the spark for me of like, oh, right, how do we solve this? What's the problem that needs to be solved here? And for you know, so for the guys who managed to create the rocket that took men to the moon, you know, they had a vision, they had but they didn't know, they had so many challenges to overcome to create that. So I'm sure that they must have gone through a flow experience from time to time in that journey. So it's yeah, to me, that's a big part of it.
And the final thought, if we think about igniting that creative spark, let's go for the adults in the lives of young people, and then maybe from the perspective of young people, if they're watching this, June, what would be your message to those two different groups of people?
I think observe your children from a parent's perspective. There will be natural tendencies that you can encourage and spend time with them in developing, and listen and learn with them and engage with them. I think that's the most important thing, is they want somebody to share this with them. So be readily available to lead them on.
And then for the young people, what do you think is the message that you'd like to give them?
I think, again, from their perspective, is to be inquisitive, to allow themselves the time to spend doing whatever it is that does bring them to life. I'm a great advocate of journaling, and I don't know how young one can encourage children to start journaling, but I think the sooner you get them to write things down and encourage them to do it on a daily basis, write it down or draw it, whatever it is, that just to spend time just practicing drawing and practicing writing. And I think from that emerges what is really going on inside us.
Yeah, I think generally you can start from the age, you can even record it verbally on a phone now, you know. And Nicola, what is your message for those two groups?
So let's think. I'm going to do it back to front. So I'll start with the young people. I think it's just really to sum up what I've already talked about. So I think it's really important, you know, if you want to try something out, you know, go for it. Get your parents or your teachers, or go and write to somebody, you know, in a company that you'd like to go and visit, or, you know, just make it happen. Go and experiment, because there is, you know, even if you get there and you discover that's not for you, you will discover something, you know, that is. It'll move you forward in your journey of discovery. So for parents or for other adults, I mean, actually, my message, I suppose, would be more broadly, rather than just focusing on parents. I'd just really like to encourage anybody who is in a position to support young people in their journey to look at ways that they can do so, because like the CEO that June was talking about, you know, in terms of taking young people into the boardroom, there are so many ways that people within organizations can really help with this. And I'd really encourage them to think about how they can do that if they're not all doing already.
Yeah, I think that's so brilliant. I also think that there's just communities of people maybe who've retired who can help tell people what their careers were like, you know. And yes, the career will change. You know, being a doctor in the 1970s and 80s and 90s was very different from being a doctor today, but there's still the foundations of the same, you know, it's still about, you know, certain things that remain the same, that thread remains the same. And we got a question in from Michelle, and she said, do you agree it is time for us to teach our children that they can create their own futures instead of finding that job or create a career?
I'd like to just to that. I think it's a wonderful idea, and I think if we can encourage our children to, whatever it is that they want to do, say, yes, I want to do this, and take away the but. How often do we say, oh, I'd love to do that, but, and that's where it stops. I'd love to do that, and I'm going to do it. Let's encourage them to do that, whatever it is.
Yeah. Do you have an answer for that one as well, Nicola?
Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly, I was actually quite inspired today by my niece on a Zoom call where she was talking about inventing something. And, you know, it's just like, she's only 6 and she's, you know, already inventing things, you know, okay, they might not be, you know, she's not going to take us to the moon or something like that yet, but, you know, who knows? I mean, through her invention, that will take her on a path, won't it? So
I invented loads of things that will never happen, but I had so much fun thinking about them, you know, oh, what about this and what about that? And it was that I think got me excited about thinking creatively and everything, you know. So yeah, definitely creating, I think. And let's see if we've got any other questions before we end off. Let's have a quick little look. I think those are the only questions that have come through. But any final thought just to end off before we finish off?
Final thoughts. Well, yeah, it just probably to reiterate something I've already said, but we really do need, we need creativity. It's not a nice to have. It is what we need in order to continue to live peacefully and happily on this planet. So yeah, I hope that that's the message we got across tonight.
And June, for you, your final thought?
Whatever you do should feel like a hobby, and if it is something that you do for money, then isn't it great that you can do what you love doing and somebody pays you for it?
Fantastic. I wish someone would pay me for everything, like my gardening and baking and
You could get out there and sell it.
I'll send you my bank details, June. Thanks very much for joining us on TEDxFrome, Frome for Thought. And thank you, June, for joining us from the Isle of Man, and for Nicola for joining us from Frome. And we hope that you can join us again next week. And we look forward to our next idea with spreading. Bye-bye.